fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor.
All right, repeat all that because I'm missing all this good B-roll.
2 years ago, the weather was
We're going to be in the
a lot
80s
better than
next
what it
week.
was now.
Did you know that? 80 degrees, 85 actually.
It was 67, 68, 69, I guess. When I was in recruiting duty, we had a ceremony every year for Iwo Jima, you know.
Got something for you. Did you find out anything about the ship already?
Do what?
Did you find out anything about the ship when it's leaving?
I mean, taking it out, dry dock, yeah.
They're still waiting for the dry dock to do.
Negative.
They're doing the dry dock.
We are aboard the USS Texas battleship. Right now it's closed to the public, but it's open for this event that we're doing.
Get Scott to sit down.
We're setting up. Get some B-roll.
This especially, I think the C8 is a put one guy on the car. Okay? Hello.
So what's going on?
We need, okay, I'm gonna get the rifle squared away. We're gonna do the firing out here. I need somebody to do the bugle taps.
So yeah, I need some because I've got to play it. One minute.
How you doing, young dog? I'm gonna put you there. Put him center.
Are you Lynn?
I'm Claudia.
It's ruined. Just move around.
And then when they go outside,
Yeah,
I want to go in front of them.
yeah.
Come them outside.
I know where Dallas
I guess they got flowers. KHOU's here. All right, cool. Channel 11's here. And turn.
is. Yeah.
This is live. You gotta be careful with it because
He's doing video for now. He's going to come out again.
Here we have a couple of Cub Scouts out here honoring these great heroes. Boy Scouts, I'm sorry. How do y'all feel about being here today?
Great. I'm really happy that I get to be here and get this experience.
It's a pretty good experience, huh? What about you, young man?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, are y'all happy that these guys fought and gave us our freedom that we have today?
Yes.
That's pretty awesome, huh? All right, thanks, guys. Hello there, sir.
Hello.
May I ask you what those pretty flowers are about?
When we do one of these ceremonies, we normally have a wreath that we put over the side of the ship.
Yes, sir.
Well, since they moved us into here, we're gonna actually take flowers and put them over the side of the ship in remembrance of those that gave their lives in Iwo Jima.
That's awesome. You're a veteran also of the Marine
Yes,
Corps?
sir.
And you was at the Battle of Iwo Jima, huh?
No, not me. I'm one of the younger guys.
Oh, okay.
The older gentleman that's sitting in there that has the baseball cap on that says Iwo Jima, that gentleman and Mr. Hammond was actually at the battle. The other gentleman that was a survivor of the Battle of Iwo Jima could not make it. He was just too far into the weather.
Awesome. Well, thank you for answering my questions, sir.
Okay.
You have a good day.
You too.
Here's the honor guards, I guess that's what they call you guys, right?
Rifle detail.
Rifle detail. Well, they're fixing to shoot those rifles off right there.
All right, we're going to go ahead. We're going to commence our program. Good morning, everyone. My name's Mike Yeager. I'm going to be the MC this morning, kind of help us move through the morning. We'll be here for a little while and have a few interesting things to say. We hope everybody will get a comfortable seat and enjoy the program. If you don't mind, please go ahead right now and either turn off your cell phones or switch them into vibration or something like that, so we would have a better chance of having an uninterrupted program and everything. Obviously, we've had to move things inside. I hope that meets with everybody's satisfaction. The forecastle out there would be, is always a wonderful place to be and be able to see the full magnitude of this giant vessel and what it means to our nation and its history. But obviously, we're using a little discretion this morning because of the elements and everything. So we appreciate everybody bearing with us. It's my pleasure to kick off the meeting by introducing our McLemore Marines Commandant. McLemore Marines is part of the Marine Corps League. We're an organization across the United States that does things to support the Marine Corps, the veterans that have served, traditions of our service, and to honor specific activities related to Marine Corps history, and that's what we're doing today. So without any further ado, our Commandant for McLemore Marines, Mr. Dave Rodriguez.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I know it's a dreary day. It's cold, a little windy. But like I said, we brought it inside. Hopefully, we can stay just a little warm. At least the wind's not blowing on us, so we're good. Okay? I'd like to introduce a couple people that are out here. For one, past Department of Texas Commandant, Mr. Inman.
Glad to be here, sir.
Thank you, sir. Also like to introduce our guest speaker, it's retired USMC Colonel John Powell. Thank you, sir. And our guest of honor, Mr. Hammond. He's also here with us today. Thank you, sir, for coming out. Appreciate it. Okay. With that being said, I hope everybody enjoys the ceremony. It's always a great thing, like Mike was saying, that we're on this vessel. It had a big part of what happened at Iwo Jima, so we are blessed to be upon it. Not a lot of people get to walk these decks anymore, and we actually were able to get up there on top, so that's great. All right, Chaplain, would you please lead us in prayer, sir?
Please rise.
Uncover. Almighty and eternal God, our Supreme Commandant, we remember today those Marines who are no longer among us. Marines who dedicated a portion of their lives to serve in our beloved Corps, to protect our nation and be proud to say, once a Marine, always a Marine. Cover.
Thank you. You can be seated. Let me take just a moment to give a little more depth to the purpose of this celebration. As I said previously, part of the mission of the Marine Corps League is to preserve the traditions and to celebrate the accomplishments of our Marine Corps and its beloved history. Today, that is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to be celebrating the Battle of Iwo Jima, one of the most famous battles in all of Marine Corps history, as well as pay great respects to this giant battleship Texas that we're on right now, and its part in that battle. First, a quick bit of understanding might be helpful, I think, about the island of Iwo Jima. This island, which was only 8 square miles in landmass, sits 750 miles south of Tokyo. Much of the island is very flat, and in World War II, the Japanese had a huge number of their fighter aircraft built in there on a major airfield. And obviously it was loaded for protection of mainland Japan. As the islands closed in on mainland Japan during the Pacific Campaign, the Japanese aircraft from Iwo Jima attacked all of our bombers that were trying to bomb Tokyo, and they inflicted very, very heavy casualties on our aircraft as they were headed to mainland Japan. So the taking of Iwo Jima and the removing of this Japanese control of the airfield was of significant strategic importance to the Allies in our effort to win the Battle of the Pacific. So important was this island that the U.S. Navy Pacific Fleet and the U.S. Marine Corps made it their top priority for personnel prior to that battle. In total numbers, the number of Navy personnel on board ship and Marines that would assault the beach total some 250,000 personnel. This was to ensure that this strategic island could be taken. Prior to launching the amphibious assault and the land invasion, the Navy Pacific Fleet shelled the island for weeks. So much so that it was thought that to be impossible that anything could have survived on Iwo Jima. But the Japanese had prepared for the attack and had moved all of their personnel and equipment underground prior to the Navy beginning their bombing. They had built 11 miles of tunnel. In those tunnels, they had 21,000 infantry personnel, complete artillery battalions, tank battalions, and other unbelievable amount of firepower that was so protected that it could not be penetrated by the naval gunfire or the aerial bombing prior to the assault. The Japanese strategy was purely defensive. This was the first island that was being attacked that was considered part of mainland Japan. So the Japanese military had no plans to retreat and no plans to surrender. This was the protection of their homeland, a very different thing than the other battles prior to this point. The land battle of Iwo Jima commenced on the 19th of February in 1945. The amphibious landing was extremely difficult because the artillery that they had pulled out prior to the Marines coming ashore was on high ground and it was shelling the beach. Also, the beach sand was very unique. It was very soft, so the Marines had difficulty getting a footing as they moved across the beachhead and onto the island. This led to tremendous Marine casualties while they moved slowly, but within days, 70,000 Marines had made it ashore. And the famous raising of the flag on Mount Suribachi occurred only 4 days after the beach landing. The taking of the airfields also occurred very quickly. This was very, very important. The taking of these airfields allowed damaged U.S. bombers to begin emergency landings on Iwo Jima after they returned from bombing Tokyo. And this actually started to occur during the Battle of Iwo Jima. So our bombers were able to come back and make emergency landings. Before the war was over, 2,451 B-29 bombers that had been shot up during their runs over Tokyo and mainland Japan and would have never made it back home to Guam to land, they landed safely on Iwo Jima for repairs and returning to bombing action. It is said that the Marines cheered during the Battle of Iwo Jima every time a U.S. bomber safely landed on the runways that they now controlled. The Marine could see the heavily damaged planes and knew that they would have been lost without their ability to take those airfields and allow an emergency landing. But the 21,000 Japanese soldiers fought to the end. Foot by foot, the Marines had to take this island and work through the miles of the tunnels. Of the 21,000 Japanese on the island, 20,000 perished. The U.S. Marines lost 6,800 during the total battle, but had over 17,000 additionally wounded. This was the bloodiest battle in Marine Corps history, but one where the immediate result led to the bombers being protected, and there's no doubt shortened the war and allowed the Japanese surrender to occur much earlier. Now, a very few quick remarks about the battleship Texas, which is also a remarkable story. The battleship Texas was commissioned long ago in 1914, this ship. During its early life and during World War I, it sailed across the northern part of the Atlantic and the North Sea, guarding U.S. shipping and its interest. During World War II, the battleship Texas escorted the transport of U.S. material to the European theater to supply the Allies. It was heavily armored and greatly feared by the German ships, so it survived the entire war up until the time the Allies launched their invasion of Europe at Normandy Beach. On D-Day at Normandy, the battleship Texas was shelling the German beach positions on Normandy as the Allies invaded across the beachhead. It is known that the battleship Texas, during the amphibious landing at Normandy, pulled within 3,000 yards of the beach and turned its complete broadside to the beach, such that it could fire its machine guns at the German pillboxes on the beach. Incredible bravery due to the size of this vessel to pull it way out in the open like that, and it made it an easy target. But it obviously was critical to the landing of the Allies on Normandy. After the Allies moved on shore and gained their occupation of Europe, the battleship Texas moved to the Pacific and joined the buildup of the task force that would attack Iwo Jima. The battleship Texas bombarded the Japanese positions for days prior to the Marines going ashore. It provided medical facilities for the wounded, resupplied ammunition and food to the Marines for the entire battle. During its life, the battleship Texas was unique in a number of ways. It was the first battleship to ever have anti-aircraft guns placed on its deck. It was the first ship to ever use a fire control system, which means that the guns and a range finder are integrated to find a solution that's better than the human eye. After the end of World War II, the battleship Texas was decommissioned in 1948. Today, the battleship Texas is the only remaining battleship afloat that participated in World War I. And it is also the only remaining vessel afloat that served in both World War I and World War II. So a remarkable vessel with a tremendous history that makes us proud as Marines and Houstonians to be part of it. So I hope you find that a little bit helpful as we go through the rest of the program around Iwo Jima and this vessel, if you will. Okay. So now to move forward in our program, we're going to have the presentation of the colors. We'll do this a little bit differently because we're inside, our color guard cannot march in, so they're going to come right to that door right there. But if you'll please rise, we'll go ahead and present the colors.
Cut. Color guard. Forward. Mark. Color guard. Halt. Freeze set. Colors. And salute.
Please be seated. Post the colors.
Kind of march. March. Forward. March.
Big down. All right. Ready.
Come on. March. Color guard. Halt. Order. Color.
So now
Ready.
it's my privilege to introduce our guest speaker for the day, and as
Right
David
there.
has said, we're delighted to have Colonel Johnny M. Powell, USMC retired, to speak to us. Colonel Powell was commissioned as second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps in June of 1962. He served as an infantry officer in the 2nd Marine Division, where he led both mortar and infantry platoons. He also spent time in the 1st Marine Division as the communications officer of the 1st Engineering Battalion. He was then released from active duty. Colonel Powell launched a long and successful career in the Marine Corps Reserves following his active duty time. He held numerous senior roles in the 3rd Battalion, 23rd Marines, including the Battalion Operations Officer, Executive Officer, and in 1979 was named the Commanding Officer for the 3rd Battalion, 23rd Marines. During Colonel Powell's time as the CO, his unit was recognized as the top battalion in the Marine Corps Reserve. In November of 1962, Colonel Powell fully retired after completing 39 years as a commissioned officer, a long and very successful career in service to our nation. Equally as successful in civilian life, Colonel Powell worked in the oil, gas, and chemical industry with manufacturing and engineering companies. His firms designed and built oil refineries, liquefied natural gas facilities, and chemical plants. Colonel Powell served as the project procurement manager and retired in 2008 as a vice president and director. Colonel Powell and his wife Madeline, who is also with us here today, will celebrate 55 years of marriage in August of this year. They have both been long supporters of the Marine Corps League and its activities to help veterans and promote Marine Corps traditions. They have 3 children and 5 grandchildren and live here in the Houston area. We're delighted to have Colonel Powell speak to us. Colonel Powell?
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Good morning. I am honored to be the speaker at this ceremony to commemorate the 77th anniversary of Iwo Jima, the Battle of Iwo Jima. We are privileged to have Sergeant Ivan Hammond, a veteran of the battle, with us here today. It is also fitting that we have this ceremony on this grand old ship. Mike has told you about her history, and she is also a veteran of Iwo Jima. I'm especially gratified to participate in this ceremony as my uncle, Sergeant Donald G. Pyle, was killed in action on Iwo Jima, March 17, 1945. In February 1945, the United States was in the 4th year of the war with Japan. The desperate days of 1941 and 42 were behind us, And in those days, we had defeat after defeat, Wake Island, Bataan, and many other unfortunate losses to the rushing Japanese. The offensive against Japan at that time was well underway. The Army and Air Force forces under General MacArthur were attacking in the Philippines, and the Marines and Navy under Admiral Nimitz were attacking in the Central Pacific. The United States had developed a long-range bomber, the B-29, and it was aimed at making a strategic bombing campaign against the Japanese islands. And as Mike mentioned, the bombers were stationed in the Marianas, and once the Marianas were seized by the Marines, Guam, Saipan, and Tinian, the CVs and Army Air Force engineers built airfields on those islands, and the attacks on Japan commenced. The planes had to fly 2,000 miles across open ocean to reach Japan. And any plane that suffered mechanical damage or was damaged by the Japanese would land in the ocean, which meant the airplane was lost and also the crew in many cases. The Iwo Jima also became the home for many Japanese fighter planes, and they were also attacking the planes and damaging and causing losses to the Air Force. To eliminate this threat and to provide emergency landings for the B-29s, the decision was reached to seize the island. By 1945, the Japanese had realized they could not prevent the Marines and Army personnel to land on their islands. Their only recourse was to defend the islands to the end. Their plan was to cause so substantial casualties to the Americans that we would lose heart and not invade Japan. So their whole plan was to kill as many Americans as they could. So to accomplish this, as Mike mentioned, they started building fortifications, well camouflaged, covered with sand, so they were difficult to spot, and there were thousands of yards of concrete put into the fortifications of Iwo Jima, not to mention all the mining and tunnels that they had built to protect their forces. So they became masters of building the fortifications. And even the 14-inch guns of the battleship Texas, which are not these are, I think, a 6-inch, but the big guns on the fore and aft of the ship, without a direct hit, they could not damage these fortifications. So the days and days of bombardment by the ships had some effect, but not the complete demolition of the defenses. Besides that, Iwo Jima was part of Japan, again, as Mike mentioned, and the Japanese had years to build these fortifications and defend the island. It was closer to Japan, so the supplies and other material to build fortifications were much easier to obtain there. In addition, there were 22,000 Japanese soldiers on Iwo Jima, and all these fortifications added to the difficulty of the Marines and the Navy personnel to attack the islands. But at the same time, the Marines recognized the change in Japanese tactics and updated the structure of the forces and the plans for how to attack these heavily defended islands. The Marine Raider and Parachute battalions, which had fought through the early part of the war, were disbanded, and the men were moved to the new divisions being formed, the 4th, 5th, and 6th Marine Divisions. Assault battalions were beefed up with additional demolition and flamethrowers so that they had a greater capability of attacking these fortifications. Updated plans included extended fire support. The Air Force attacked Iwo Jima for 72 days before the landing. And there was, besides a couple of raids by the Navy, they fired for 4 days, continuous fire onto the island. So as, again, Mike has said, there was some hope that that when the Marines landed, the challenge wouldn't be as great as it was. So after 76 days of air and sea bombardment, the battle for Iwo Jima began. On this day, 26 February, 77 years ago, the Marines had been on the island for 8 days. The 4th and 5th Marine Divisions had landed on 19 February, and 4 days later, the 28th Marine Regiment, part of the 5th Division, seized Mount Suribachi. They raised the first flag on the extinct volcano, and later a second flag was raised, so it was bigger flag so it could be seen by the ships and by the rest of the island. So that second flag raising was the one that is captured in that picture, that it became a symbol of the Marine Corps and also a symbol of the success of all our forces in the Pacific. By D+6, which is 6 days after the landing, the 3rd Marine Division had landed. So now there were now 3 divisions fighting the Japanese. And at that time, we had seized about half the island. And this was after 8 days. It took 29 more days, excuse me while I get my paper squared away, of intensive combat to finish the job. Organized resistance ended on 26 March 1945. The 5th Amphibious Corps, made up the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Division and supporting units, sustained over 24,000 casualties and over 6,000 killed in action. There's nothing I can say to give you an adequate picture of the fighting on Iwo Jima. Although the large number of casualties is a strong indication of the intensity of fighting, they do not present a clear picture of the situation in the infantry battalions. The 3rd Battalion Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 28th Marines, was the main component of the patrol that reached the top of Suribachi and planted the first flag. A member of that platoon, Corporal Richard Wheeler, wrote a book, The Bloody Battle of Suribachi. It provides a detailed picture of the platoon's actions on Iwo Jima. The platoon landed on D-Day with 46 men, 44 Marines, and 2 Navy corpsmen. After 2 days in reserve, Echo Company was committed to the attack on Suribachi. By the time the flag was raised on D+4, 2 days after they commenced the attack, they had taken 17 casualties. By the time, after capturing Suribachi, the 28th Marines were committed to the effort to seize the rest of the island. An additional 19 of the original unit were killed or wounded in that effort. When the island was secured, only 4 of the original members of the platoon remained, and 1 of them had received a minor wound. Many other platoons throughout the 3 divisions had similar experiences. In addition to the standard task organization, each of the divisions landed with several replacement drafts. My uncle, Sergeant Pyle, was a member of one of the 3rd Marine Division drafts. During the training on Guam, before the invasion of Iwo Jima, he was in charge of the division rifle team. Because of that, he did not have a normal billet in one of the battalions. So he landed with the replacements, and the replacements, members of the replacement drafts were assigned to the combat units to keep the assault units combat effective. This enabled the infantry battalions to absorb losses, to continue to advance and accomplish the mission. Admiral Nimitz summed up the fighting on Iwo Jima. Among the Americans, he said, among the Americans serving on Iwo Island, uncommon valor was a common virtue. The legacy of the men who fought and died on Iwo Jima goes far beyond winning this crucial battle. The flag they raised and the picture that emerged from it has become a symbol of the United States Marine Corps and the commitment of all the men and women who served in the United States forces that defend our country. The Iwo Jima Marines' valor, dedication, and commitment to their comrades has set an example for all Marines that have come after them. All of us know of their epic fight and seek to emulate them. Incheon, Chosin, Way City, Fallujah, and the hundreds of unnamed fights in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan testify to the legacy they have handed down. I want to remember the veterans of the battle by reading excerpts from remarks made by Navy Chaplain Roland B. Gettleson at the dedication of the 5th Marine Cemetery. This is perhaps the grimmest and surely the holiest task we have faced since D-Day. Here before us lie the bodies of comrades and friends, men who yesterday or last week laughed with us, joked with us, trained with us, men who were on the same ships with us and went over the sides with us as we prepared to hit the beaches of this island, men who fought with us and feared with us. Somewhere in this plot of ground there may lie the man who could have discovered the cure for cancer. Under one of these Christian crosses or beneath the Jewish Star of David, there may now rest a man who is destined to be a great prophet, to find a way perhaps for all to live in plenty with poverty and hardship for none. Now they lie here silently in this sacred soil, and we gather to concentrate the earth in their memory. It is not easy to do so. Some of us have buried our closest friends here. We saw these men killed before our eyes. Any one of us could have died in their places. Indeed, some of us are alive and breathing at this very moment because men who lie here beneath us had the courage and strength to give their lives for ours. To speak in memory of such men as these is not easy. Of them, too, it can be said with utter truth. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here. It can never forget what they did here. No, our poor power of speech can add nothing to what these men and the other dead who are not here have already done. All we can hope is to follow their example, to show the same selfless courage and peace that they showed in war. These men have done the job well. They have paid the ghastly price of freedom. If that freedom be once again lost, as it was after the last war, the unforgivable blame will be ours, not theirs. So it is we, the living, who are here to be dedicated and consecrated. Semper Fidelis.
Thank you, John. Colonel Pyle has been one of the leaders of our organization for a number of years, and he and his wife Madeline we're very grateful for that they could be here today and provide us with the remarks that you've just heard, particularly since John's family was involved in the battle. Okay. So as our Commandant David said in his opening remark, we're delighted today to have a very, very special guest, Mr. Ivan Hammond. Ivan, would you raise your hand once again? Mr. Hammond, as has been said, is a veteran of the Battle of Iwo Jima and a local Texan living here with us in the Texas City area. Let me tell you a little bit about this fine man. Mr. Hammond was raised in Bayou Jack, Louisiana, and graduated from high school at the age of 16. He had been working as a hobby on radios and other electronic equipment since he was 12 years old. After high school, he worked in various shops and everything, repairing electronics, but in his heart, he had always been fond of the United States Marine Corps after in school reading about the Battle of Belleau Wood. This was the famous battle in World War II where the Marines held back the Germans, although tremendously overnumbered and overpowered, and earned the Marines the name of Devil Dog from the Germans. So in October of 1943, when Mr. Hammond turned 18, he enlisted in the Marine Corps and headed to San Diego, California for boot camp. He graduated from boot camp in January of 1944 and briefly went to the Naval Radio School at Texas A&M University to use his skills in electronics. He was then sent to the 5th Joint Assault Signal Company in Miramar, California, where he learned to communicate via radio with artillery, naval gunfire, and aviation support. At the end of this training, he was 19 years old. He was already a sergeant, and he was immediately assembled into the landing force for the Battle of Iwo Jima. Mr. Hammond landed on Iwo Jima at Green Beach No. 1 on day 1, and he was on board the island for all 36 days. As a radio operator, he went by the call sign of Duplex, and on day 2, he and his team called in a 40 aircraft bomber strike to bomb the area just in front of the infantry as they moved across the beach and across the island. On day 4, when the famous picture was taken of the raising of the flag on Mount Suribachi, Mr. Hammond was right at the immediate base of the hill. In his words, what I did was, as the infantry moved forward, I moved alongside of them, talking to the aircraft for bombing runs as they made their way across the island. Mr. Hammond said, after the Marines had secured the airfields, but still in battle for control of the island, it was very motivating to see these heavily damaged B-29 bombers land right there in front of them on the island from their missions over Tokyo. And all the Marines knew that these planes, just by looking at them, had been almost destroyed and would have never made it home. Yet these planes were repaired, the pilots and the crew's lives were saved, and they went to bomb again. As Mr. Hammond said, the next 36 days were a long, long period of his life, but they were able to take and secure the entire island. As previously discussed, the 2 Iwo Jima airstrips, after being controlled by the Marines, were then used by the U.S. to begin launching unchallenged airstrikes into mainland Japan, which was very instrumental in shortening the war. These airfields were so useful that upon the end of the Battle of Iwo Jima, Mr. Hammond went back to Tarawa, the Pacific island where the planning and training was taking place for the invasion of mainland Japan by ground forces. The planned invasion that he was part of getting ready for was called Operation Olympic. And Mr. Hammond said, but he was in the group that planned to be on the first wave of that battle, which was planned to commence in November of 1945. But after the surrender of Japan, the war ended on September 2nd, 1945, and luckily Operation Olympic was never needed. Upon the surrender of Japan, Mr. Hammond was sent to Japan as part of the occupation forces. He was involved with making sure that the surrender agreements between Japan and the Allies were carried out in full. Mr. Hammond told me that he could not remember much of what he did during that time, but the Japanese people established relations with the U.S. troops there, treated them well, and were very accepting of their presence. No issues occurred during his time in Japan, and he was treated well while he was in country. In May of 1946, Mr. Hammond was discharged from the United States Marine Corps. He came back to the Houston area and enrolled in the University of Houston on the GI Bill, and 4 years later, in 1951, graduated with a degree in electrical engineering. He then began a 45-year career as an electrical engineer, 35 with Union Carbide, which is now Dow, and 10 years as a consultant. Alongside of that time in corporate America, he was also developing residential real estate for 30 years. Today, he is accompanied by a number of his family. I had a pleasure of talking with his daughter, Lynn Hammond Payton, who, in my opinion, serves as his public affairs manager, and helped me with the biography of her father, of whom she is obviously very proud. She can quote the dates of his career better than he can. And she took Mr. Hammond just last week to Washington, D.C., where he was attended a seventh reunion. So they toured Arlington Cemetery and the statue of the raising of the flag over Mount Suribachi with great humility. Mr. Hammond was married for 65 years. He has 5 children. He has 10 grandchildren. He has 6 great-grandchildren and 2 great-great-grandchildren. Please join me in thanking Mr. Hammond for his service.
Like you said.
guess you might want to say a word or two. So, anyway, I'm 99 now, 99 years old, so things to that I could not.
You're 96. Get close.
Is that close enough? Anyway, I guess the Battle of Iwo Jima was probably one of the battles of all time for us. And my Marines and I took care of everything. It was I think we were there for 36 days. I believe it's correct. And it's the statistics of what the number of men we lost is listed somewhere in the documents. And so, at any rate, we got an opportunity to go to Japan, and actually we tried to make up with the Japanese, and we've had some success with some of them. We go down and march down the streets, and the little children, they always, all children are always wonderful and everything. And so at any rate, I got home when I went to University of Houston, got a double E degree, and then went down to Union Carbide in Texas City for 35 years. And it was a fabulous company to work for. And they would loan me out every once in a while to go up to our sister plants and help them out. And I don't know how many trips that we went north and did that, but it was a wonderful job. And just so and we just that's a little bit about what I did. So it was one of those all-time battles, and how I got out of there, only the good Lord knows. He brought me home. Thank you.
Before you sit down, sir?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to present you. Mr. Hammond, thank you for coming out for us thank you for being here. You're, as a Marine, you're a brother, and we're glad you made it home. And also like to present to you, this is a piece of deck of Battleship Texas with your name inscribed on there. And then on the bottom, it says Iwo Jima, 1945. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We also have a cover for you for the Marine Corps League and a coffee mug with the Marine Corps League as well too. All right, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, sir. Just turn this way, sir. There you go.
Ready, 1, 2, 3. Charles and Paul. Charles. And Paul was fine.
Okay, I'm going on.
Ready, 1, 2, 3. I got it.
Thank you.
One more. Hold on, turn around a minute, man.
Okay, good.
Can I do something real quick? Can I wipe his nose?
I didn't know y'all had it. I haven't kept up with the reading. My dad hasn't.
It's a little cold out here. My room is here.
I know, I just want to wipe it before y'all do any more photos. Thank you. I just had to do that. I know, it's
So I got to see.
You know what I'm going to do? Let me give this to you. Very good.
And Colonel Powell, if you'll join us, we also have a gift for you today for your fine remarks and gracing us so much with your presence. We appreciate it, sir.
Mr. Paul, thank you for coming out with us. Thank you for being our guest speaker. Also, we know the history of your family with Iwo Jima. We also have a deck board at the Battleship Texas with the name inscribed Sergeant Donald G. Pyle, Iwo Jima, 1945.
I just need one
It's
more
the one.
hand. Thank you.
It's tough like that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
So as we move toward closing our ceremony, it is a tradition to lay a wreath at the tomb of the fallen in their honor, so the world is reminded to never forget. Today we will lay a wreath in the water to remind all of us of the sacrifice made by these brave men at this point in history, the 6,800 Marines that died on Iwo Jima in the most costly of terms in regards to human life in Marine Corps history. If you'll please rise, we're going to have a modified ceremony, and we're going to actually lay the wreath through the hatch there by the drum mount. If you'd like to follow this, but we'll go ahead and commence now. Vaughn? Guys, we need a little room there. You'll remain standing for just one moment.
All right, folks, that concludes the ceremony. I thank everybody for coming out and viewing this. For all those that are here, Mr. Paul, thank you, sir. Mr. Hammond, thank you very much for being here with us. And all the guests that came out to view this. We really appreciate y'all being here. We'll do this, we do this every single year. We'll have to probably modify it for next year because they are saying they're gonna move the Battleship Texas. But we'll see what happens at that point. We will be going to lunch at the Monument Inn for those of you that are having lunch with us. We're going right over there right after this. So hope to see y'all there as well too. Thank you for everybody for coming out.
This not only is where the 1st Marine Division was founded, but this is also where part of the ship's commissioning ceremonies took place in 1914. So there's actually a great picture of the ship in Norfolk, 1914 being commissioned, and there's snow piled up. So she was commissioned March 12, 1914, and it was very cold that day. Captain Albert Grant was kind enough to keep his remarks to a short 5 minutes. So this is much better than what they had that day. Don't know how the weather was when the 1st Marine Division was founded, though. I'll go back around this way. So, as we go along here, all these empty spaces you see here, there would have been anti-aircraft guns in there. And anti-aircraft guns here on the fantail were actually operated by the McLemore Detachment in Texas. So we had 50mm guns here, 40mm guns. We have 3-inch guns. The 3-inch are kind of long-range anti-aircraft. The 40mm are medium-range anti-aircraft. The 20mm are the last resort short-range anti-aircraft. So when your 20mm guns are going off, you don't want to be up here because anything that's in range of those guns is about 5 to 10 seconds away from this ship. Down here there would have been uniform guns. These would have been manned by sailors, though. On the other side also would have been manned by the ship's Marine Detachment. The ship was at the Battle of Iwo Jima, right? The ship was also at the Battle of Okinawa after Iwo Jima. And because of the experiences of what happened at Iwo Jima, the Captain Charles Baker, ordered that the entire crew stay at their battle stations for over 50 days straight for the entire Battle of Okinawa. And that meant they're here on this gun in this space 50 days. No beds, no showers, no shaving. Well, it's a little nicer than that. Every 2 or 3 days, one person at a time could go down below to clean up a bit, shave, shower, and then come back. And one at a time. And they did that because at Iwo Jima, they saw the effectiveness of the Japanese air raids. And then at Okinawa, it was expected to be even worse, and it was. And Captain Baker figured that the only way that they could stay safe through the battle, to be ready to face that threat, was to have everyone at their stations through the entire battle. And this ship was the only ship that did that, and she did not get hit by anything at the Battle of Okinawa. She's not the only ship that didn't get hit, but the crew pretty much all universally felt that Captain Baker's orders are the reason that they did not get hit. Now, this gun, so like I said, this was manned by Marines. There was a Marine up in that tub there, so that would have had, it's called a gun director in it. And that Marine's job is basically, he points the gun director at a target, and it's connected to this 40mm, points the 40mm at the same target. The gun director has a kind of sophisticated electromechanical sight in it that can kind of help you lead the target better, which is why they do that. So that Marine's name, his name was Ralph Fletcher, and he actually told us about some of the stuff he saw at Okinawa. Well, on April 12th, 1945, a little close to 3 weeks into the battle, he is up here, and they get word that an air raid is coming in, and he hears from another battleship off in kind of that direction, USS Tennessee. He hears their general quarters alarm going off. That means everyone is running to their battle stations, getting ready, getting into their air defense to shoot down any planes coming in. And he hears that general quarters alarm going off, and he can see them running around on the ship to get to their guns. And while he sees them running around, a kamikaze hits a 40mm gun just like this one. And from that moment on, he was no longer upset about being stuck at his battle stations. From that moment on, he felt like he owed Captain Baker his life for that. There's another Marine on this ship, or on this gun. His name was Eugene Hillier, and he actually told us an unrelated story that happened the same day, which I think is kind of a funny coincidence. So in here, this is called the Spud Locker. This is where they stored potatoes. Well, apparently all the Marines here on this gun, because they couldn't go down their bunks, when they slept, they would actually just sleep in here, in the Spud Locker where they stored potatoes. And he actually called this the Potato House when he told us about this, which I thought was a great name. But we had a little storage in here, but you see, this is just a tiny little space, and it would be just full of potatoes. So they'd be sleeping about one dude at a time for a couple hours. That's it. And they figured, I guess this is, hey, we can get inside, get out of the cold, because when you're out in open waters, there's a lot of wind. It's kind of cold a lot more frequently than you would expect, even in places you might think of as warm. So Ralph Fletcher, who was up there would have been actually life rafts right here next to that gun director. So as far as I know, he pretty much just slept in the life raft when he had the chance. So you just hop over there and there you go. Better than the deck, I guess. Now, in here, so these are, we'll go around the other side. So there's one that's uncovered there. So these are 5-inch 51 caliber guns. These are actually original to the ship's construction. So in 1914 we had 21 of these. These are the last 6 that are left. Now, one of them, I don't know which one of them was also operated by the Marine Detachment on this ship, out of the 6. There was, so these were really common back around the time that this ship was built and commissioned, but by World War II they were really obsolete, and a lot of them had taken off of the ships and put other places as needed when they were being phased out. There we go. Yeah, I just couldn't get the trash bag off of it. Just tearing it up. So this is a 5-inch 51 caliber gun, and are you familiar with the Battle of Wake Island? Ever heard of that? So the Battle of Wake Island took place just about the same time the Pearl Harbor.
In the tree line. Hello, 82 guys, 1 is turning in. Here's 4, no copy, clear. That last